The people who are generating the emissions need to be aware of and pay the price for that, for generating those emissions. That's ultimately how you solve the problem. The issue today is it's too expensive.
That's Exxon CEO Darren Woods. He wants to make a point about how we are very unlikely to reach a climate goal in responding to the climate emergency. And it isn't just the fault of fossil fuel companies or big oil. Now, of course, he has an agenda here, and of course he's gonna say that, but he also makes a point that I think is legitimate. As we'll explain, some of what he says makes sense, and some of it is just a corporate CEO scapegoating consumers. But take it for what it is. Let's dissect the interview and hear what his claims are. So first, the interviewer over at Fortune asks the CEO about reaching the 2050 goal for carbon neutrality, and he's clearly not hopeful. Let's watch.
I don't know when the end's going to come. I think 2050, from what you see today, what's being done today, the infrastructure investments that are being made, we're not on the path to 2050. I think most objective analysis would tell you that. We've waited too long to open the aperture on the solution sets in terms of what we need as a society to start reducing emissions, and we're not investing nearly enough in the technology. Today's technology will not solve this problem. And the reason is there's a cost issue here. And if you look at the solutions being offered, the dirty secret that nobody talks about is how much is all this going to cost and who's willing to pay for it. And if you look at the policies that are being put out, the way the governments are advancing this, the cost is very implicit. It's not an explicit cost. Now, we have tabled proposals with the US governments and governments around the world that there are mechanisms to get out there and start down this path using existing technology, but you need to make the cost transparent.
Okay, I have a lot to say in response to that. But before we get into some of the costs, I want to just briefly focus on the costs associated with the fossil fuel companies themselves, Cenk. Because a lot of people in America don't know this, but the US is the top producer of fossil fuels. We also happen to be the top exporter of fossil fuels. We also tend to import fossil fuels from other countries like Canada. Now, why would we do that? If we're producing more than any other country, why would we need to do that? Well, it turns out that fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil do not have the type of refineries necessary to refine the type of oil that is being produced here in the United States. So instead of investing in their refineries to upgrade them and update them to be able to refine our fossil fuels, they instead don't do that. They don't make that investment and instead import a certain type of oil, right, from Canada that our refineries are able to refine. And part of the reason why they make the decision to avoid these investments in their refineries is because Wall Street doesn't want them to. They want the fossil fuel companies to maximize their profits because that means that the shareholders are gonna make more money off of those maximized profits in the form of dividends or higher value for the shares of the company's stock, that kind of thing.
We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now. Yeah, in this case, I don't know that I blame Wall Street. I think that I blame the government, and let me explain why. So they say, look, if the government lets you, of course, cheat as much as possible. What do I mean by cheat? So he talked about, well, the consumers are not willing to pay the price. Okay, we'll get to that. But you guys aren't willing to pay the price. You're the ones that cause climate change, which causes all these catastrophes. And then the US taxpayer has to pick that tab up. Why do we have to pay it? Why don't you pay it, right? But Wall Street says, no, don't. Instead, bribe the politicians so you guys never pay that. It'll be a tiny percentage of your profits. These politicians can be bought for dirt cheap. And then just dump all the costs onto the American taxpayer and then trick them with all this talk of American independence. There's no American independence. You guys can sell the oil to China all you like. There's no restrictions because the government didn't put any restrictions. Why? Again, you bribe them a little bit, legalized bribe, campaign contributions. It's like the best investment you could possibly do. Sell the oil anywhere you like.
Right.
They'll have to import more oil. This idea of American oil is a joke. They have a giant laugh over it in their boardrooms.
And by importing the oil from Canada, it's one of the worst methods for our environment. So that's the reason why I bring up the issue with the refineries here in the United States and how they're unable to refine the oil that's produced here in the United States. And there's different quality oil produced depending on which country or which region the oil is being produced from. So that's part of the reason why.
Yes.
Yeah.
So look, guys, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, hence government doesn't work. No, hence government has to work. Otherwise, the robbers rob us blind. Like the SEC, et cetera, is supposed to be our cops on Wall Street. And they're supposed to say to ExxonMobils of the world, hey, if you produce a product that has all of these what's called externalities, extra costs that the public has to bear, no, you're gonna have to bear that cost. And it doesn't come cost free to the rest of us either, guys. That means the price of oil and gas are going to go up. But right now, as things stand, we're paying less, relatively speaking. They're making tremendous profits, but the costs are getting dumped back onto us.
Yes, that's part of the problem. And part of what he says in the context of this interview that I agree with is that there is less of an appetite to respond to the climate emergency by consumers because, make no mistake, a lot of the cost burdens associated with that have been placed on the shoulders of individual Americans. And I mean, I'm already starting to get a taste of that now. And we talked about it in a bonus episode for our members, which ended up going viral because someone clipped it out. But it's absolutely true. I mean, California's transition to electric vehicles and the impending ban on gas-powered vehicles is gonna be incredibly costly for individuals, and they're incredibly frustrated by that. And so I wanna go to the next video because in this portion of the interview, he kind of gets into that a little bit, and I want to elaborate on my thoughts. Let's watch.
The people who are generating the emissions need to be aware of and pay the price for that, for generating those emissions. That's ultimately how you solve the problem. The issue today is it's too expensive. People can't afford it, and they know, governments around the world rightly know that their constituents will have real concerns with that. And so we've got to find a way to get the cost down, to grow the utility of the solution set, make it more available and more affordable so that you can begin this transition. And so today I would tell you, we're not on that path. The policies that are being put in place aren't aggressive enough and don't incentivize the right kind of actions to be successful here.
No, I mean, that's a fair point. Ordinary citizens, individual Americans should not be dealing with the overwhelming financial burden that comes along with responding to a climate emergency, which these oil companies, in some cases, knew about decades prior to the general public knowing about the climate emergency. And let's not forget about the fact that these fossil fuel companies have executives, including CEOs, that are raking in tens of millions of dollars in their annual, pay packages. So obviously they have the resources to contribute to the response of the climate emergency. And to your point, Cenk, unfortunately we have a corrupt and impotent government that refuses to place the financial burden on these companies and instead plays all these little games that, honestly seek to lie to ordinary Americans about how, oh no, we're gonna help you with tax credits and we're gonna help you with this and that. In reality, it's just not enough to help ordinary people pay for the transitions that they're expected to make. Like they're not getting the help that they need. And on top of that, fossil fuel companies aren't paying, in my opinion, the price of what they have engaged in polluting the environment and accelerating the climate emergency.
Yeah, so he seems like a pleasant guy. He does a great job of like burying terrible things in business gobbledygook. So it's our job to translate that for you. So he says that people need to pay the cost of emissions. He's talking about consumers. But wait a minute, you guys, the oil companies are the largest emitters.
Exactly.
So why don't you have to pay that price? Because even in the interview that he's doing and in the Wall Street circles, that's not even remotely a possibility. They're like, what, us pay the cost of our business? No way. What did you think we bribed the American officials for? To dump all those costs onto them. And by the way, he didn't tell you that they're getting, the oil industry gets about $24 billion in subsidies every single year from us.
Absurd.
They're the most profitable companies in the history of the world. Now Apple and others have started to catch up and pass them.
Yeah.
But So the most profitable companies need 24 billion extra from us?
Let me back that up with some actual numbers, okay?
Yeah.
So ExxonMobil is number 3 on the Fortune 500 and the largest gas and oil corporation in the United States, having posted a $36 billion profit, not just revenue, profit in 2023.
No,
Put that in your
36
pipe and smoke it, okay? When local governments, when Gavin Newsom tells you, oh, we're gonna ban gas-powered vehicles and you need to transition to an electric vehicle and you're not gonna get any help to afford it. Okay, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
So I want you to understand what Anna's saying. So when you might have the vision, if you've never seen Young Turks before, or you don't know how this game is played in essence, you just watch mainstream media, you might think, well, no, Democrats are the ones holding them accountable. No, corporate politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, take campaign contributions, what we call legalized bribes. So a guy like Gavin Newsom can actually hold these companies accountable and say, hey, listen, we're transitioning the gas to electric powered cars, okay? But in order to do that, we've got, you guys dumped all these costs onto us, so we're going to take some from your profits. As an excise tax, there's a million different ways to do it, right? So for example, they get a lot of their oil from us, from federal lands, American taxpayer land. We could increase the amount that we charge them. It's a thing that's never discussed. I researched it, and it turns out, as usual, the average nation charges twice as much tax for oil taken from their ground as America does. Why does America charge so much less to these companies? Because our politicians are crooks. So they help to dump the costs onto us when we have to transition to cars that might cost more, that have other things that we have to pay, but they never ask the companies to chip in, even though they're the most profitable companies in the world. And there's one other thing, subtext here, that you might have missed entirely. What he's arguing for there is also give ExxonMobil more government money to do renewable energies.
We need
so he's
nuclear.
like, there's not enough subsidies. I need more subsidies,
Right.
even though I'm the 3rd most profitable company in the world.
Yeah, his pay, by the way, his compensation, pretty incredible. Darren Wood's compensation rose 52% to $35.9 million in a single year in 2022 after the war in Ukraine lifted oil prices and the company posted a record profit. But look, I've talked about, in my opinion, the need for nuclear energy. I think that, fossil fuels are accelerating the climate emergency. And so I'm in favor of renewables. I just don't think renewable energy is enough to close the gap at the moment. Maybe in the future it can be developed to the point where it can. But we need something that is going to power the country in the cleanest way possible in this, I guess, in the meantime, as we continue to develop other clean energy sources. And I think nuclear is the best option to close that gap.
So look, there's a million different options and things to discuss, but the one thing structurally we have to change the mindset of the American government on is dump all of the costs onto the American taxpayers, because we live under corporate rule and they serve these corporations because they're funded by these corporations. So no, the corporations have to pay their fair share. They have plenty and they got it from us. It was our oil in the first place, not theirs. So it's way past time for them to pay their fair share.